A young man plans elaborate crimes he believes will net him millions of dollars. As he puts his violent schemes in motion, the lives of innocent people and police officers mean nothing. The FBI tries to bring him to justice, but they soon find themselves up against a criminal enterprise.
Caught in the act, a disguised bank robber hurled explosives at police and disappeared in a hail of bullets. When police identified the suspect, they connected him to an armed kidnapping, but they couldn't find him. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The suspect's behavior was organized but unpredictable. Everyone leaves a trail, and agents hoped they could pick up the right one.
Martinez, California is a suburban city 30 miles north of Oakland. As dawn broke on October 15th, 1993, most of Martinez was still asleep. Nobody noticed the dark figure creeping across the rooftop of a downtown bank. He carried a top-of-the-line cordless power saw and drill with special motors that reduced noise. He seemed to know exactly where to cut into the roof. The masked man exploited a flaw in the bank's security system. The alarm was unable to detect movement in the crawl space between the roof and the bank's ceiling, allowing him to move freely. Just below was the bank's office. It was rigged with motion sensors. He knew if he descended below, he'd trip the bank's alarm. The masked man also knew bank employees would arrive in a few hours and deactivate the security system. He settled in and waited for them. Hours later, Martinez residents began their morning commutes. Two miles from the Martinez Bank, in the city of Pleasant Hill, a police operator answered a seemingly unrelated emergency call. Someone saw two Hispanic males entering a supermarket with guns in their waistbands.
Copy that, 220 on a move.
It was just before 9 a.m. Pleasant Hill police officer Bob Lauderdale responded to the supermarket.
M1, who's the reporting party?
He's still on the line. A payphone.
Well, my dispatcher advised that the person making the call was calling from a public phone directly across the street from the store.
He just hung up. He gave his name as Kyle Farrell.
I noticed a black male adult standing in front of the phone booth. was wearing a black varsity type jacket with tan sleeves and carrying a full face motorcycle helmet.
Officer Lauderdale and Sergeant Gary Ezel entered the supermarket to investigate. They would begin an aisle-by-aisle search for the suspects. Back in the city of Martinez, the masked man had waited 3 hours in the crawl space above the bank's ceiling. Bank employees were preparing to open to the public. They deactivated the alarm when they arrived.
How's
Hi.
vacation?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Very
Nice to
relaxing.
be back at the office.
Not really, but
The masked man watched a teller punch in her access code to the ATM room, where she would fill the machines with cash. It was his cue for a dramatic entrance. The door automatically locked behind the teller. The robber threatened to kill her co-worker if she didn't open the door. Then he opened it himself. The bank's manager was in the break room. She heard the commotion and glass breaking.
Put the money in the bag! Go to hell! Hurry up! Put the money in the bag!
She slipped out and called 911.
Hurry up! Put the money in the bag! Come on!
Report of a 211 bank in progress. 6678 Alhambra
Dispatch
Avenue.
alerted Martinez police.
The manager of the bank is advising that she heard someone in the other room shouting, "Get your hands up," to her tellers.
All available units raced to the bank with their sirens off.
Hurry up! Hurry up! Put the money in the bag! Hurry up! Hurry up! Get the money in there!
The robber left with a backpack stuffed full of cash. But to keep it, he'd have to evade Martinez police. Officers arrived at the front of the bank. Martinez and Pleasant Hill police departments had only 9 officers available to respond. And 2 of them were tied up on a suspicious call at a supermarket.
I need someone to the rear.
The robber saw an easy escape, the back of the bank, but he needed a diversion. Martinez traffic officer Earl Moffat moved to cover the rear of the bank. In his 10 years on the force, this would be the first time Officer Moffat would fire his weapon.
He's firing rounds at me, and he's only about 20 yards away. So what was going through my mind is just chaos.
As the gun battle continued, Pleasant Hill police were still investigating the 911 call about 2 men with weapons entering the supermarket.
no, I sure haven't.
None of the employees saw anything out of the ordinary.
Have you seen anything like this?
I haven't seen anything like that.
Yes, I'm at the rear.
Okay.
Request mutual aid response from Pleasant Hill ASAP.
Okay, Bob, we gotta go.
All right.
Officer Lauderdale was immediately suspicious.
After we were unable to locate anybody matching that description, I thought the bank robbery in Martinez was too big of a coincidence.
In Martinez, the bank robbery suspect continued his firefight with Officer Moffat.
I couldn't copy. Sam 24 to 97.
His weapon empty, the officer was forced to reload. The gunman used the moment to his advantage. Moffat knew he would be vulnerable to ambush if he climbed over the fence. He followed procedure and called for backup. As officers cordoned off the neighborhood, Martinez police were joined in the investigation by the FBI and Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore. The FBI automatically investigates all bank robberies. Any crime against those institutions is a federal offense.
We have concurrent jurisdiction and traditionally have worked bank robberies very closely with local police. When I first arrived, the scene was quite chaotic. We had been notified that a robbery had occurred and that a gunfight had ensued after the robbery.
Commander Tom Simonetti supervised the crime scene investigation for Martinez police.
At the crime scene, we found shell casings from a Glock 45 pistol, as well as expended rounds that had been fired at our officer.
FBI agents know most bank robberies are poorly planned attempts to get drug money. The evidence this robber left behind suggested a more sophisticated criminal.
The method of operation was so unique. You just don't see robberies committed every day by people dropping through the roof on a rope.
On the rooftop, evidence technicians processed the abandoned power tools. They found no fingerprints. Agents interviewed bank employees about their traumatic experience. They described the robber as a muscular black male in a red jacket. The average bank robbery nets just $3,000. The bank manager determined that the robber escaped with over $35,000. And by getting it from the ATM room, no die packs were placed in with the money. Technicians found no fingerprints, but discovered a shoe print on the desk where the robber landed. While the crime scene was being processed, Martinez police combed the neighborhood behind the bank for the masked suspect. They soon picked up his trail. It was marked by $20 bills that had fallen from his backpack. But the money trail abruptly ended at the closed end of a cul-de-sac, leaving no sign of the suspect. Pleasant Hill police officer Lauderdale was guarding the crime scene when he recognized someone in the crowd of onlookers.
I suddenly noticed that the subject I had seen making the 911 call was now standing in a group of people who were watching the activities at the bank robbery. I thought this was too much of a coincidence, seeing the same subject down at the shopping center and was now at the bank robbery in Martinez. I contacted the subject in order to identify him and find out what he was doing in the area. What are you doing here today?
The officer knew the 911 caller at the supermarket gave dispatchers the name of Kyle Farrell. Now the man said his name was Ural Wills.
Oh, it's around the corner. I just didn't want to interfere. All right.
It was suspicious enough for Officer Lauderdale to request the man to go to the police station for questioning.
The subject was surprisingly cooperative and had no problem with going to talk to Martinez detectives.
The man furnished Martinez police with a driver's license that seemed to confirm his name was Ural Wills. A check of his record revealed that 3 years earlier, in 1990, He was arrested for an armed robbery of a supermarket in Oakland, but was later acquitted. Despite the prior arrest, police had nothing linking the man to the Martinez bank robbery. They had no choice but to release him. They didn't know that uncovering the man's true identity would lead them to the bank robber, who was willing to kill to escape police. In Martinez, California, a bank robber threatened employees' lives until he got what he came for. $35,000 in cash intended for the bank's ATM machines. Police searched for the suspect by following a trail of $20 bills near the crime scene until it ended in a residential cul-de-sac. For FBI Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore, the end of the trail was itself a clue.
We don't have that yet. We're still waiting. The trail of $20 bills stopped there. So initially, we assumed that there had been a getaway car somewhere near that end of that cul-de-sac.
Can you recall if anything early today
Martinez police interviewed residents who lived in the ordinarily quiet suburban area. One homeowner said that earlier in the day he was working in his front yard. He noticed a brand new Jeep Cherokee speed past his home. He thought the white female behind the wheel might have been just a reckless teenager. The witness said the vehicle had no license plates, only a placard from a nearby Jeep dealership. Several other witnesses in the neighborhood also saw the vehicle, but none of them could agree on the Jeep's color.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you. I may call on you again.
Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore pursued the vehicle lead.
Yes, Bob Moore with the FBI. How you doing?
He called the dealership advertised on the SUV and learned they sold over 60 new Jeep Cherokees in the past 3 months.
We began identifying the people who had purchased those cars with negative results.
Each Jeep Cherokee had to be investigated. Martinez Police Commander Tom Simonetti knew it would be painstaking work.
We also talked to several of the registered owners of new Jeeps, and they had either no criminal record or they had been out of town, and were able to prove that they weren't involved in the robbery. We found that one had been stolen from a nearby BART station. The vehicle was recovered in the city of Concord, and after investigating it and processing it, it was determined that it was not involved in the crime. The last 2 Jeeps that we looked at were both sold to a rental car company in the city of Antioch.
This is what we have here. Anything else?
Agents went to the rental company to investigate the last 2 vehicles.
You can give me the rental paperwork on this last week. I need to know.
They requested copies of the rental contracts. They learned one of the Jeeps was rented the day before the robbery and returned the following evening. The name on the contract was one Ural Wills, the name used by the motorcyclist in the Martinez Bank parking lot, who was also the same man police observed making a 911 call near a Pleasant Hill supermarket. Martinez police needed to clear up the question of how Ural Wills could have simultaneously fled from the area in a Jeep and been spotted in the bank's parking lot as an onlooker. For answers, they turned to Officer Lauderdale.
Take a quick look at these. When I presented the picture of Ural Wills and in the photo lineup to Officer Lauderdale, he identified a different person as Ural Wills.
Lauderdale picked the photo of Doug Jones, a known criminal associate of Ural Wills.
In looking into Mr. Wills's criminal history, we determined that he had an accomplice who had committed several crimes with him.
Detectives believed that the accomplice, Doug Jones, posed as Wills at the scene of the robbery to throw off police.
The information we got actually came back to this guy.
They now considered Wills their prime suspect. To agents, it was clear why Jones made the call while the bank robbery was in progress.
Yeah, that's who I contacted.
The planning of this included the attempt to create a diversion of the police by making a 911 call to the Pleasant Hill Police Department.
Martinez police ran a more detailed background check on Ural Wills. They spoke to the Oakland detectives that arrested him 3 years ago for a supermarket robbery. They expressed their frustration that he was later acquitted. Martinez commander Tom Simonetti learned of yet another recent arrest of Ural Wills.
During this investigation, we had found that Mr. Wills had been arrested by the California Highway Patrol for carrying a loaded Glock pistol.
Martinez police discovered that the bank robber also used a Glock pistol. Ballistics tests on the recovered bullets revealed that they were from a Glock 9mm. Martinez investigators also learned from Oakland criminal informants that Wills often preyed on other criminals.
He had made several armed robberies of known drug dealers in the city of Oakland, which led us to believe we were dealing with somebody who either wasn't afraid or was very brazen in his criminal activity.
The same criminal informants gave police insight to Ural Wills' methods of operation. They said he often used female getaway drivers because Wills believed they were less suspicious to police. The fact that a woman was seen behind the wheel of the Jeep was consistent with Wills' criminal history. From the auto rental contracts, agents were able to trace Ural Wills' financial records.
The Jeep Cherokee had been paid for with a credit card by Wills. We determined through subpoenas that the credit card had been issued by a credit union in Berkeley.
From Berkeley Police. I'd like to know if Mr. Ural Wills...
They also learned Wills had a savings account at the credit union, but found no unusually large deposits that could be linked to the Martinez bank robbery.
We asked the employees at the credit union if he were to appear at the credit union to call the Berkeley Police Department.
Thank you very much.
Even without any suspicious bank deposits, agents and Martinez police commander Tom Simonetti still believed evidence implicated Wills in the bank robbery. Wills had an apartment in Antioch, California, 20 miles east of Martinez.
Based on the information compiled by the Martinez Police Department, the FBI, and the Antioch Police Department, we were able to obtain a federal search warrant of Mr. Wills' apartment in the city of Antioch.
30 days after the bank robbery, FBI agents and a police SWAT team prepared to execute the search warrant on Wills' apartment. They knew he had already fired 10 rounds at a Martinez police officer. The SWAT team suspected Wills would shoot again. FBI agents and a Martinez police SWAT team were serving a search warrant on an apartment belonging to bank robbery suspect Ural Wills. They found one man in the apartment. The SWAT team quickly determined he was not Wills. They identified him as Doug Jones, who was a known criminal accomplice of Ural Wills, as well as Wills' roommate. Jones was the man seen making the 911 call near a supermarket before the Martinez bank robbery, and the man spotted in the bank parking lot after the robbery. Officers removed Jones from the apartment and took him to the station for questioning. As investigators executed their search warrant, they found several items of interest, including a bulletproof vest. Agents also found a red jacket that matched witness descriptions of the bank robber's clothing. In the bedroom, they identified a pair of sneakers as the type worn by the robber. They found an even more telling clue inside one of the shoes. $3,000, all in $20 bills. The stolen money from the Martinez bank was also entirely in $20 bills. The shoes were sent to the lab where the soles could be compared to a shoe print recovered from the Martinez bank robbery. Detectives also uncovered hospital bills that suggested Wills was injured on the day of the bank robbery. Martinez Police Commander Tom Simonetti followed up.
Upon contacting the doctor at the hospital, he told us that Mr. Wills had told him that he slipped on a wet floor at a grocery store and broke his foot. The doctor, however, pointed out that the injury was more consistent with a hard impact, in particular a straight down impact from falling or dropping off something.
Wills was further tied to the crime when analysts confirmed one of the shoes found in his apartment matched the shoe print taken at the scene of the Martinez robbery. At the police station,
Where's Mr. Wills?
agents questioned Wills' roommate and criminal associate, Doug Jones. As suspicious as Jones' actions were, police couldn't charge him with a crime or make him talk. If Jones knew where Wills was hiding, he wasn't telling investigators.
The biggest frustration in this case was trying to locate Mr. Wills after he knew we were looking for him.
222, go ahead.
We had searched his residence, we had contacted everybody that knew him, and there was no doubt he knew we were after him.
Agents knew Wills was a career criminal and were certain he would strike again. They spent nearly a month searching Bay Area neighborhoods Wills was known to frequent. They found no sign of the violent fugitive. While investigators hunted for Wills, he was planning a crime even more ambitious than his Martinez bank robbery. He gathered a group of accomplices and filled them in on his plan. Four days before Christmas in 1993, Wills' accomplices descended upon the Antioch, California home of jewelry store owner Gene Mayer and his wife Ruth. They posed as detectives investigating credit card fraud. Once the door was opened, they revealed their sinister purpose.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! You're too low, man! Get on the ground now! Get down there! Get down! Just stay quiet. You won't get hurt. Shut up! Shut up! Now!
Two bound the couple with duct tape, while a third moved toward the back of the house to look for a safe.
You guys stay quiet. Don't move. You won't get hurt. You got the safe? Good. Let's go. Get up. Get up. Get up. Get up there.
The men told Gene Mayer they were kidnapping his wife. They said they'd phone with the details on how he could retrieve her. Mayer could do nothing, as Ural Wills' accomplices left with his wife and a safe full of jewelry. They used Mrs. Mayer's Suburban as their getaway vehicle.
Get in there. Let's go.
Just 10 minutes later, Gene Mayer freed himself and called 911. Antioch police responded. The scene was supervised by Sergeant Scott Williford.
When I arrived at the Mayer residence, officers were in the process of cordoning off the crime scene with police tape and barriers. I went inside the residence, and Gene Mayer was in the process of being interviewed. He was very traumatized.
You've got to do it. Get after it.
Detectives tried to focus Mr. Mayer on describing his wife's abductors,
I need this.
but he got only brief glances at them.
All right, okay. What did they take? Well, they took the
As
safe.
detectives processed the house for evidence, they discovered a ransom note.
One was white, one was...
Mayer never saw the kidnappers leave it. The note warned him not to contact the authorities. Gene Mayer worried that he might have made a mistake by calling police. He feared the kidnappers would retaliate by killing his wife. To help find Mrs. Mayer, Antioch police requested assistance from the FBI. They searched for any sign of Ruth Mayer's Suburban that her abductors used as a getaway vehicle. Investigators knew the chances of finding a kidnapping victim alive diminish the longer the victim is held captive. Officers in Antioch and neighboring communities urgently scoured parking lots at shopping centers, thinking the kidnappers might have abandoned Mrs. Mayer's SUV and switched to another vehicle.
Yeah, we'll go back.
They found nothing.
Still on the airport road, looking for that subject.
You've got to do it. Get after it.
Detectives learned that the jewelry in the stolen safe was worth $400,000. But Mr. Mayer wasn't concerned about the jewelry. He wanted his wife returned unharmed. Blindfolded during her abduction, Ruth Mayer had no idea where she was or what the kidnappers had in store for her. Bank robbery suspect Ural Wills used a team of accomplices to rob a jewelry store owner and kidnap his wife. Inside the Mayer home, Antioch police analyzed the ransom note left behind by the suspects. The kidnappers demanded $2 million for the safe return of Mrs. Mayer. Police anticipated they would phone with instructions. Technicians installed phone traps to trace and record any incoming calls. But none came. For more leads, Antioch Police Sergeant Scott Williford gathered details about the jewelry stolen from the house.
I want you guys to do your job.
If any of it turned up, it might put them on the trail of the kidnappers.
Since Mr. Mayer was a jeweler, he had specific detailed information on the description of all the jewelry. We were able to provide or compile a detailed list and put it out to other agencies regarding the stolen property.
The FBI brought additional resources and helped coordinate the search for any sign of Mrs. Mayer or the Suburban her abductors stole from her driveway. By the following morning, investigators were still combing the Mayer's neighborhood for clues.
Teams of officers and agents began talking to people in the neighborhood. We were knocking on doors asking if people had seen anything suspicious in the area.
In addition to interviewing neighbors, investigators like Antioch Police Sergeant Scott Williford turned to the media for help.
We did everything possibly that we could to get the information out to the public so we could have the public's assistance in trying to locate Ruth Mayer.
Hundreds of volunteers distributed over 8,000 leaflets throughout the Bay Area. The leaflets had photos of Mrs. Mayer and a description of her Suburban. The strategy quickly brought results.
Within hours after the kidnapping, with the information put out to the other agencies, we located the Suburban that was stolen.
Technicians processed the vehicle for evidence. They found nothing useful. Investigators theorized that the kidnappers transferred Ruth Mayer to a second getaway vehicle. They took impressions of fresh tire tracks found at the scene. The impressions could be compared to the suspect's vehicle if it was found. Although they had found her vehicle, detectives still had no clue where Mrs. Mayer was being held. The kidnappers left her unattended for hours at a time. She used the opportunity to bite through her restraints. Mayer knew an escape attempt was too risky. Instead, she memorized the details of the garage in case she was ever asked to identify it. In the driveway, she saw the outline of a car. It was covered with a blue tarp. Mayer thought about shouting for help, but she was concerned what might happen if her abductors heard her. For the time being, she had no choice but to wait. Mr. Mayer quickly raised the money he hoped would bring his wife home. Wearing latex gloves, agents recorded the bill's serial numbers. They were prepared to make the drop as soon as they received instructions from the kidnappers. Two days after the kidnapping, police responded to a call from a Berkeley credit union. The FBI had asked the manager to call police if he saw the suspect from the Martinez bank robbery. He spotted Ural Wills trying to make a deposit.
Looks like it's all here. Bring up your account number.
The teller tried to access the account, but it was frozen.
Sometimes that works.
Berkeley police arrived and calmly approached the bank, but Wills spotted them. As they frisked Wills, Berkeley police retrieved a loaded clip for a 9mm Glock pistol. They also found Wills had something else to hide.
Located in his pocket was a key to a car. The police officers asked him where his car was parked. He denied owning a car. The officers then walked down the street checking vehicles until they located his vehicle.
The keys in Wills' pocket fit a Ford Explorer. FBI Supervisory Special Agent Bob Moore searched the impounded vehicle for evidence that would link Wills to the Martinez bank robbery. Instead, he uncovered the first break in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping case.
The key items of evidence found in the Ford Explorer the day of Wills' arrest were a cell phone, a weapon, a pager that belonged to Ural Wills, and a bag containing jewelry.
Agents had previously thought the Ruth Mayer kidnapping and Martinez bank robbery cases were unrelated. All that changed when they discovered some of the jewelry was personalized. RM were the initials of Ruth Mayer. Agents showed the jewelry to Ruth Mayer's husband, who confirmed it was stolen from their home. Investigators now considered Wills a suspect both in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping and the Martinez bank robbery. To further tie Wills to the Martinez bank robbery, FBI technicians performed ballistics tests on the Glock handgun recovered from Wills' vehicle. They compared the bullets test-fired by the Glock in the lab to bullets recovered from the Martinez Bank crime scene. The tests indicated the bullets were not fired by the same gun. Investigators believed Wills probably disposed of the pistol used during the bank robbery and replaced it with another gun of the same make and model.
All right, we found the jewels in your car. I want to know where you were and what you were doing.
Wills was no longer just a bank robbery suspect. He was also a suspect in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping.
We can already connect you to Mrs. Mayer. What these jewels are doing in...
Desperate to save Mrs. Mayer's life, Antioch police asked Wills to tell them where she was being held. But Wills refused to cooperate. He remained silent on his involvement in the Ruth Mayer kidnapping. With Wills in jail, investigators were concerned his accomplices would panic and do something desperate.
This kidnapping certainly exhibits some organization to it. But
authorities held a press conference to appeal for new leads. They also warned Wills' accomplices that they were closing in and that Mrs. Mayer should be released unharmed.
On the other hand, I can't say for certain, but certainly we're looking at them.
I've been here, that's what I'm telling you. Nobody's telling me nothing.
On the fourth day of Mrs. Mayer's captivity, Christmas Eve, the man guarding Mrs. Mayer received instructions from the other accomplices in the kidnapping plot. His orders were to get rid of Mrs. Mayer any way he could. The man ordered her to stay down and out of sight while he drove. Mrs. Mayer couldn't be sure whether she was going to live or die.
That's it?
Kidnapping victim Ruth Mayer had endured 4 days of captivity. The ringleader of the abduction, Ural Wills, was in police custody on bank robbery charges. That left Wills' accomplices leaderless, and they were worried that the law was closing in. The accomplices ordered the man guarding Ruth Mayer to get rid of her any way he could. "30 miles north of her Antioch, California home where she was abducted, in a town called El Sobrante, the kidnappers decided to get rid of Mrs. Mayer by releasing her.
Now don't take off your blindfold.
Antioch Police Sergeant Scott Williford believed police efforts to reach the kidnappers through the media paid off.
Well, they knew the seriousness of the crime. They knew the pressure was on. This was a national publicized case at the time, and they didn't know what to do. It was so high profile, everybody knew all the details of this, and they were forced to release her.
News of Ruth Mayer's return made headlines and the local newscasts.
I just want to say that I'm so very happy to be home.
Anything that you can...
Investigators questioned Mrs. Mayer about her ordeal. She didn't know the location in which she was held and could not describe her abductors. Even so, she provided agents with important detail.
She was able to use her senses as she was held in this garage and actually had remarkable recall as to a lot of the circumstances that were occurring in the area where she was held. She described certain sounds that she heard while she was held. She described the sound of trains going by. She described the sounds of buses or diesel-powered vehicles having to gear down or slow down as if to take a sharp turn.
We've gotten a fair amount.
Based on information obtained from Mrs. Mayer, investigators were looking for a location near train tracks and major bus lines. They used the cell phone seized in Will's vehicle to narrow the search. Agents quickly obtained the phone's billing records.
And they just make their way heading east.
They concentrated on calls Wills made around the time of Mrs. Mayer's kidnapping.
We were able to track the cell phone usage and determine where it had been in use the prior night, including in Antioch, and as well as the numbers that it had called that night.
Investigators learned towers in West Contra Costa County picked up Will's cell phone signal on the evening of the kidnapping. They began looking for streets in Contra Costa County where train tracks and major bus lines intersected. Based on Mrs. Mayer's observations, agents were looking for any home that had a vehicle covered with a blue tarp in the driveway.
We located the house in San Pablo, and just from the visual inspection outside, it matched the criteria and the description that Ruth Mayer gave us.
Agents obtained a search warrant for the home and found no one inside. Mrs. Mayer identified the garage as the place in which she was held. Agents wanted to question the home's owner, but they were unable to locate him. Investigators sought out homeowner's relatives in an effort to find him. Edward Rodriguez was the homeowner's nephew. Agents were unaware that he guarded Ruth Mayer during the kidnapping. But Rodriguez mistakenly believed the agents were looking for him and said he was just about to turn himself in.
Against you in a court of law.
Investigators found Rodriguez remorseful about the part he played in the kidnapping and convinced him to cooperate.
How about picking out some for me?
Ultimately, the guard confessed to the whole crime, confessed to the planning, the details of the operation, and laid out the whole crime from A to Z.
Rodriguez named all the conspirators in the scheme.
Anybody else here on this page?
He said Ural Wills planned and led the kidnapping operation. Agents corroborated the guard's statements with Will's cell phone records. They later apprehended all the conspirators. Brian Tomasello, one of the gunmen that burst into the mayor's home, was found guilty on 6 counts of robbery and kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison. Edward Rodriguez was found guilty of kidnapping and robbery. The jury gave him a short 8-year sentence because he released Mrs. Mayer. Before he could be tried for the Ruth Mayer kidnapping, Ural Wills was found guilty of the Martinez bank robbery and was sentenced to 39 years. Prosecutors learned that Wills was suffering from kidney failure. Doctors gave him less than 10 years to live.
Ural Wills is already going to be...
Wills was certain to die in prison.
He's having serious kidney.
Prosecutors informed Mrs. Mayer of their plans not to try him for her kidnapping.
She's a forgiving person. She knew justice was served. She knew he was in custody, Mr. Wills, for the rest of his life. And I believe that she forgave everybody.
As he pursued his violent schemes, Ural Wills had expected to make millions and live a life of luxury. Instead, the FBI and local police made sure the criminal's last days were spent behind bars. In Texas, an unsuspecting federal agent is abducted at gunpoint. The men responsible escape unseen into the vast South Texas terrain. Valuable minutes pass before the lawman's disappearance is discovered. With the life of one of their own in jeopardy, his colleagues are determined. They will find the suspects, bring them in, and make them pay.
When the victim of a violent crime is a member of law enforcement, the job of investigating becomes personal. At a United States border crossing, armed fugitives kidnapped a customs inspector, then vanished. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Desperate to find their colleague, local, state, and federal authorities waged a full-scale manhunt in Texas and in Mexico. Racing against the clock, they hoped their resolve would make the difference.
Authorities at the U.S. port of entry at Del Rio, Texas, see hundreds of legal crossings between the United States and Mexico every day. But they also see an average of $250 million in confiscated drugs, all manner of criminal activities, and thousands of illegal immigrants every year. The men and women of U.S. Customs know the threat of danger is always present. Hiding behind the throng of harmless civilians are criminals who view them as the enemy. On the afternoon of January 27, 1984, a vehicle with Texas plates pulled up to the port's primary checkpoint. Customs Inspector Jose Torres asked the occupants for identification.
¿Qué edad tienes?
The three passengers provided green cards showing they were legal resident aliens allowed to work in the U.S. The driver explained he was an American citizen, but produced only a baptismal certificate as proof. Inspector Torres could not accept it. Logging in the car's license plate, he ordered the driver to a secondary checkpoint for further verification. The vehicle was met by Customs Inspector Richard Latham.
Hello, man. Baptismal certificate? Step out,
a 10-year veteran at the border, it was his job to handle questionable persons or vehicles.
Follow me.
Latham brought the driver inside to speak with an officer of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. The INS officer chastised the driver over his insufficient papers. Since the man claimed he was a U.S. citizen, born and raised in El Paso, the officer interrogated him on details only a resident could know. In minutes, the man's detailed answers persuaded the official that his lack of paperwork was his only indiscretion. The driver was cleared, but Latham still had to inspect the vehicle.
Stand over there. You need to look inside your car.
Following routine procedure, he checked for illegal drugs or undeclared contraband. Since there was nothing suspicious about the men or their behavior, Inspector Latham was alone during the search. To everyone working at the port that day, it seemed like every other day. Then, at about 4:45 in the afternoon, a detective with the Del Rio, Texas police arrived. He informed border officials that a jewelry store had been robbed 15 minutes earlier in the Mexican border town of Ciudad Acuna, 2 miles away. His information was unfortunately sketchy, but he said Mexican police were searching for 4 Hispanic males, at least one of whom could speak English. Police and border officials went immediately to alert each of the inspectors on duty. Since the robbers might try to enter the United States, inspections at the primary checkpoints were doubled.
Good afternoon. How you doing? Where you heading?
Customs officials wanted to be certain that no one connected to the robbery would enter the country.
Got anything to declare? Okay.
But at around 5 o'clock, Inspector Torres received disturbing news. Customs Inspector Richard Latham was missing. Del Rio Detective John Martin was at the port that day.
For him to just suddenly disappear, we knew something was wrong.
Although the time of the disappearance marked a shift change, Latham had not followed the required protocol for leaving his post.
He had not left in his own vehicle. He had not checked out and told anyone else that he was leaving. And the standard procedure for those inspectors, even if they were rotating off for a coffee break or to go to the restroom, would have been to have notified other inspectors at the port. None of this had occurred.
Their only conclusion was Inspector Latham had been kidnapped.
Our first investigative response was to determine when Inspector Latham had last been seen and what he had been doing.
Customs Inspector Torres reported seeing Latham searching an older model vehicle at the secondary checkpoint. He described the car as a gray, late 1970s Pontiac Grand Prix with 3 or 4 Hispanic males standing alongside, who matched the jewelry thieves wanted by Mexican police. The inspector described the driver as a male in his 20s, wearing an El Paso baseball cap. Torres realized that as he turned to check the next vehicle, Inspector Latham must have discovered something. And the kidnappers struck, then escaped the port unseen. U.S. Customs Service Special Agent Dennis Harlan helped lead the search for Latham.
It was a race against time. It's been my experience that if an officer is taken at gunpoint, he is eventually killed.
Everyone knew the window of opportunity to rescue the kidnapped officer was short. They sprang into action. A customs officer retrieved the computer list of all license plates that passed through the Del Rio port into the U.S. between 4:15 and 5 p.m., about the time Latham disappeared. The list was less than 100 vehicles, but it did not contain the owners' names and addresses. For that information, they had to access the Department of Motor Vehicles database. Hindered by 1980s computer technology, it would take valuable time to accomplish. Del Rio police began creating a composite likeness using an identikit. Based on Inspector Torres and other witnesses' recollections, pre-drawn facial features merged piece by piece into an image of the driver. When the composite image was complete, investigators sent it to every local, state, and federal police agency in the area. Police units fanned out in search of a gray Grand Prix. Investigators now had a possible likeness of the driver, but nothing specific on the passengers. Customs Service helicopters supported the ground units in the search. But with few leads, they knew finding the men in the Texas backcountry would be difficult. 1.5 hours had lapsed since Latham disappeared. A car traveling at an inconspicuous 55 miles per hour could be anywhere within 20,000 square miles. The search area was enormous. And with each minute, it got even larger. In record time, the DMV database returned the list of license plate numbers with the owners' names and addresses. There were 8 Pontiac Grand Prix on the list. Police officers went to the 6 addresses in Del Rio to investigate the vehicles. But 2 were registered to owners in El Paso, where the driver of the suspect vehicle said he lived, and that was 10 hours away. A customs agent contacted the nearest FBI field office to seek their help and informed Special Agent Don Weatherman about the kidnapping.
It was very discouraging to realize that we had a missing customs inspector, no trace of where he might be, what happened to him, and so very little information other than the fact that he was last seen doing his job, and no one knew or seen anything of him since that time.
The customs agent asked Weatherman to direct the field agent in El Paso to track down the 2 registered Grand Prix. FBI Special Agent Charles Riley was assigned to interview the owners of the cars. But at both residences, the vehicles were missing, and no one was home. Agent Riley theorized that the registration information he received may have been outdated. He returned to the El Paso FBI office determined to find the cars and their owners.
That evening, I had the clerk in the office conduct further license checks on the two vehicle license plates, trying to come up with the actual owners of the vehicles at the current time.
It would take hours to cross-reference the data. Much of it would be done by hand. State and local police manned roadblocks in every direction from the port.
Where you going? You got any ID?
All vehicles leaving the area were stopped and searched. When the San Antonio FBI agents arrived in Del Rio, they were briefed on the latest developments of the search. Despite the efforts of dozens of cooperating law enforcement agencies, they had come up with nothing. Nearly 7 hours had passed since Inspector Richard Latham was abducted. By the end of the first night's investigation, there were still no promising leads.
You always hope that they'll turn them loose, but history doesn't prove that out. So basically, we knew we were looking for a body after probably late that evening, you know.
The full-scale search was still ongoing the next morning. Fixed-wing aircraft, which could travel faster and farther than helicopters, widened the search perimeter to cover the vast Texas brush. Texas state troopers continued their roadblocks in the area surrounding Del Rio.
Oh, how you doing today, man? Where you headed?
Although by that time, they knew the suspects were likely gone. In El Paso, Special Agent Riley eliminated as suspects an elderly couple who owned a gray Pontiac Grand Prix. But the other owner sold his vehicle to a man by the name of Ricardo Cortez. Cortez had failed to register the vehicle in his name. A background check showed Ricardo Cortez had a criminal record for drug possession. Riley located his most current address.
I went to that address, spoke with Cortez's mother, and determined that he had been out of town for 3 or 4 days. She was not sure when he was going to be back. She stated that Cortez still owned the car in question and had the car with him. I went to the El Paso Police Department and obtained a photograph of Cortez and wired a copy to the port of entry in Del Rio, Texas.
Cortez looked similar to the composite of the driver.
U.S. Customs Office, El Paso.
Finally, agents had their first suspect, something specific they could move on in hopes of finding Richard Latham and the men who abducted him. But as their hopes rose, 50 miles away, a man collecting firewood near Eagle Pass, Texas, made a grisly discovery. The body of a man wearing a U.S. Customs uniform.
Men, step over here, please.
In Del Rio, Texas, authorities believe jewelry thieves crossing the border in a gray Pontiac Grand Prix abducted U.S. Customs Inspector Richard Latham. Investigators identified the driver of the car as Ricardo Cortez, who had been missing since Latham's disappearance. But even as they got that first real lead, they learned the body of a man wearing a U.S. Customs uniform was discovered in a ditch off Highway 277 near Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officers secured the scene, but decided nobody would enter until the FBI arrived. While agents at the Del Rio port of entry boarded a helicopter for the 60-mile flight to Eagle Pass, Texas state troopers continued to man roadblocks throughout the area. The kidnappers were now most likely gone, but no one could be certain. Though frustrated, Trooper Art Corral, who worked the road from Del Rio to El Paso, was not going to give up the search.
We were out there for hours, checking cars and on the roadblock, and it seemed like we weren't going to get anywhere. That our supervisor advised to go ahead and stay on that road, but break off the roadblock. So my partner and I decided to stop cars that had 3 or more Latin males in the car. About that time, we saw this car go by, and there were 3 people in the car.
However unlikely, the men inside might be connected to the abduction. The driver got out and approached the troopers.
How you doing, sir? How you been?
Corral explained why he had pulled him over.
4 male Hispanic subjects are involved in kidnapping.
The driver gave his ID. He was a taxi driver from Eagle Pass, hired by the men in his car to take them to Presidio, Texas. He admitted he was glad to be pulled over. His passengers were agitated and made him nervous.
They want me to take them from Ensenada to Eagle Pass.
The trooper decided to run a check on them.
How you doing, guys? Give us your IDs, please.
He got the green cards of the 2 passengers, Rafael Calderon and Jesus Ramirez. Neither of them fit the description of the suspect driver of the Grand Prix, and there were only 2 of them. Determined to be thorough, Trooper Corral and his partner would run a check on the names just in case. Inside the car, Corral's partner tried to radio dispatch.
Any other station out there can hear me? You can copy me? Please answer.
But there was no signal. He tried again. Still nothing.
It's common around that area to lose contact. You had a lot of valleys and peaks, and sometimes you would lose contact with the radio station. You'd have to move location in order to make contact with one of our stations.
He took down the passenger's information to call in from a different position.
How much to pay you? Tell you what, sir. Here's your ID card. Follow me back to the vehicle, okay?
They believed they could afford the risk of letting the car go.
Out here, there's only one road. You may not have another road for 100 miles. So when you let a car go, for whatever reason, and something comes up, you probably have a good chance of finding them again.
The troopers took the chance and doubled back to catch a radio signal. By 2:15, FBI agents arrived in Eagle Pass to process the scene where the body was discovered. Everyone working the case had hoped they would find their fellow lawman alive. But the evidence was clear. It was Richard Latham. The inspector had been bound by his own handcuffs and shot twice in the back. The kidnappers were now cop killers. U.S. Customs agent Dennis Harlan was distraught over the loss of his friend.
Yeah, we lost one of ours. One brother officer has been taken and murdered. And those of us that have been in the field, we take that personally. And I was sorry that Richard was dead, but in a criminal investigation of this nature, finding of the body is very, very important. the body becomes evidence. So I felt a sense of relief that we had found the body. Sense of sadness that a friend of mine was gone.
Examiners would determine he had been shot with a .38 caliber handgun, the same as his service weapon, which was missing. For Del Rio detective John Martin, the execution-style murder shed a chilling light on the type of criminal they were after.
Someone that has the temerity to kidnap a law enforcement officer and to subsequently murder that officer, knowing the response that you're going to receive. That is the most dangerous type of individual. That means they don't take anyone's life in any regard whatsoever, and they would kill the average person on the street in a moment.
DPS unit to base.
Back on the highway, the troopers kept trying the radio. After several minutes, they made contact.
Yeah, go ahead. Make it. Go ahead.
Yes, I need 329 checks on 3 subjects.
Dispatch officers ran checks on the men in the taxi.
They came back with a return and said there was a possible hit on one of the passengers, which was Ramirez in the back seat.
There was an outstanding DUI warrant for a Jesus Ramirez. It might not be the same Ramirez, but the troopers needed to verify his identity.
So we decided to go ahead and try to catch up to the car.
We are attempting to locate. We're traveling westbound on 90 at this time, so we can locate that.
Fortunately, the taxi was still on the highway. The driver pulled over for a second time. Trooper Corral cleared the driver and approached the vehicle to speak to Jesus Ramirez.
I start yelling for the guy in the back seat that I need to talk to him to come on out. At this time, I see the passenger kind of slouch in the back seat, and he's moving around. You know, I can see his head and shoulders kind of squirming in the back seat. So I keep calling him back, and all of a sudden,
Shots fired! Shots fired! I ain't talking to you. Go in the back.
While investigating a federal officer's abduction, Texas state troopers pulled a car over to question a man inside.
Put your hands up!
But the traffic stop quickly turned dangerous for Trooper Art Corral and his partner.
when the shot was fired, my partner reached for the shotgun, and we didn't have time to call anybody. You know, it's just us two. And when there's a shooting, you got to react quickly, you know, because that could mean life or death.
Put your hands in the back. Give me the other one.
With his partner covering him, Corral got Rafael Calderon out of the vehicle and into custody. He placed him behind the squad car, away from any weapons.
Get on down, get on down, get on down. One in.
Then they went to check on the man in the back seat. Jesus Ramirez had shot himself in the head with a .357.
Another one over there too. Okay. Got it. Come there.
The troopers recovered that weapon and a .38 caliber revolver. Now they needed to know why the traffic stop turned deadly. One trooper retrieved Ramirez's identification and a piece of paper from his jacket, while the other removed Rafael Calderon's belongings.
Guns on you? All you got?
Including a large knife and a cloth bag.
Get a card.
Corral suspected that Ramirez would not have killed himself over a DUI warrant. He knew there had to be another motive.
DPS unit to base. We have subject Ramirez in custody.
The troopers called in the incident and learned that Latham's body had been discovered. Customs agent and the FBI believed the highway shooting was connected to the Latham case and flew to the scene. When they arrived, they reviewed the evidence. Along with the .357 Ramirez used to kill himself was a .38 caliber handgun, a service revolver later determined to be Inspector Richard Latham's, the gun that killed him.
It's in the bag. Found a whole bunch of jewelry.
In the pillowcase taken off Calderon, they discovered tens of thousands of dollars of jewelry that matched the items stolen during the robbery in Mexico. They also found a handwritten bill of sale for a 1975 Pontiac Grand Prix taken from the dead man's jacket.
It's transported.
The seller's name was Ricardo Cortez, the first suspect identified hours earlier. Now, with Rafael Calderon in custody, it was time to get some answers. On the way back to Del Rio, FBI Special Agent Moses Alanez interrogated Calderon.
I was in the back seat, a Ranger's vehicle. On the way, Mr. Calderon began relating to me what had transpired the previous 2 days from the point that they left El Paso, himself and 3 other friends, into Mexico.
Calderon claimed that Jesus Ramirez planned the robbery. He said Ramirez picked the jewelry store in Mexico, believing it was easier to get away with armed robbery there than in the U.S. While Calderon, Ramirez, and a third man he knew only as Carlos robbed the place, their driver, Ricardo Cortez, waited in the getaway car. They took as much as they could grab in a few minutes. Then left. Calderon said they headed for the border, crossing at Del Rio. Everything seemed fine when Cortez passed the INS interview and the customs inspector searched the trunk.
I'm gonna look in your car.
They began to get nervous when he checked the back seat. He found the bag of stolen jewelry, so Ramirez pulled a gun. As they left the port, Cortez and a man named Carlos took the inspector's service revolver and secured him with his own handcuffs. According to Calderon, Jesus Ramirez was in charge the entire time. He decided the inspector had seen too much. They had to get rid of him. Calderon said he and Ramirez forced Latham into the ditch. He claimed it was Ramirez who shot the inspector twice in the back with his own service revolver. After leaving the customs inspector to die, the men continued to Eagle Pass, where they crossed the border back into Mexico. At a motel there, they went through the jewelry, putting the most valuable pieces into pillowcases. The plan was then to separate. Calderon and Ramirez would take the jewelry back into the United States. Ricardo Cortez and Carlos were supposed to keep the car in Mexico for a few days. They would all meet later in El Paso. The agent noted that during Calderon's version of events, he repeatedly named Ramirez as the trigger man. As the suspect was taken to jail in Del Rio, agents reviewed the facts of their case. Rafael Calderon was in custody. According to him, the shooter was Jesus Ramirez, who had killed himself at the traffic stop. The driver of the Grand Prix Latham searched was Ricardo Cortez of El Paso. The fourth suspect was a man Calderon knew only as Carlos. He and Ricardo Cortez were still at large. Customs Special Agent Dennis Harlan was determined to find them.
Every effort was going to be made to capture and prosecute the people that were involved.
After the abduction and murder of U.S. Customs Inspector Richard Latham, investigators developed 4 suspects. One suspect, Rafael Calderon, was in jail. Another was dead, and 2 more were still at large. 6 hours after Latham's body was recovered, the state police in Piedras Negras, Mexico, asked FBI agents to come to their office. Some of the customs inspector's personal effects had been discovered in a parking lot across the border from Eagle Pass, where his body was found. Included were Latham's wallet, a police-issued canister of mace, and several documents of interest to FBI Special Agent Don Weatherman.
We also located 2 California Highway Patrol traffic citations. One listed to Rafael Calderon, the subject in custody, and the other listed to Carlos Pena.
Less than 24 hours after the abduction, investigators had an ID on the 4th suspect. Carlos Pena was a Mexican native legally residing in the U.S. Investigators received his photo from the Immigration and Naturalization Service. Now they had to find Pena and his associate, Ricardo Cortez. It seemed that wouldn't take long. The next day, El Paso police received a tip that Cortez and Pena were hiding in an apartment in South El Paso. In minutes, an arrest plan was underway. The 2-block area surrounding the apartment building was locked down. Coordinating units on the ground and in the air was FBI Special Agent Charles Riley.
The streets were cordoned off in that area, and roadblocks were set up. U.S. Border Patrol helicopters were in the air looking on the rooftops, and officers were posted throughout the area while the search was conducted.
The search for the fugitives was a sensitive mission. SWAT teams cleared the building, apartment by apartment. It was dangerous work. The hallways were narrow and provided no cover if the 2 desperate men were to attack. Despite the thorough search, they came up empty. U.S. Customs Agent Dennis Harlan was undaunted.
You can throw tons of manpower at a case like this, but you need some luck. And good luck is brought about by good, hard, aggressive police work.
Then a new lead came when state police in Piedras Negras, Mexico, discovered a gray 1975 Pontiac Grand Prix abandoned in a nightclub parking lot. FBI agents crossed the border to search the car. But Mexican law prohibited a full-scale processing of the vehicle.
We could not remove the vehicle and bring it back to the United States. We couldn't remove anything except prints from the vehicle.
The FBI agents photographed the car to document the items they could not collect and dusted for any latent prints. It was a surprisingly low-tech process, Scotch tape and index cards. But it paid off when the fingerprints were sent to the FBI lab in Washington.
We determined that all 4 suspects that were identified had matching prints lifted from the vehicle.
In El Paso, Texas, U.S. Customs agents continued their search for Ricardo Cortez and Carlos Peña. They learned Peña and the now dead suspect Jesus Ramirez had lived in the same apartment complex. They interviewed the apartment manager who identified the photo of Peña.
He does look familiar.
She said she last saw him and Ramirez on the night before the Latham murder.
They were unloading a bunch of stuff out here one night.
The two were moving boxes from a gray Grand Prix into an apartment. A third man arrived, driving a blue car. From the agent's other photos, she identified him as Ricardo Cortez. She said the 3 men drove away that night in the Grand Prix, leaving the blue car in the lot. The manager got a call from Ricardo Cortez the next day, asking her not to tow the car. Either he or his mechanic would pick it up soon. That blue car was their best chance of getting to Cortez. Through the night and into the morning, agents maintained surveillance. Around noon, a man came and drove the car away. It was not Cortez or Peña. The agents followed. The man drove to a quiet part of town. He entered a bar. A few minutes later, he came back out alone and was stopped by the agents.
Ask you a few questions? Sure.
The man admitted the car belonged to Ricardo Cortez. He said Cortez asked him to pick it up and meet him at the bar. But Cortez never showed, so he left the keys with the bartender. He said he didn't know where Cortez was staying. The agents verified his story with the bartender. He'd not seen Cortez either. While surveillance continued on the blue car, FBI agents located Cortez's girlfriend.
What's going on? What's this all about?
We think your daughter's boyfriend
Ma, no
might
lo
be involved.
escuche, no es posible. Ricky nunca hiciera eso. Está mintiendo.
¿Tú sabes algo?
They asked if she knew where Cortez was. She said that she had not seen or heard from him in over a week.
Mira, si sabes algo, se lo dice, ok, no estés mintiendo, ok.
Tú sabes, no me dice nada.
Sí, tú sabes, tú te lo tienes que decir, no estés mintiendo,
Ma'am,
ok.
this is very important.
It's been over a week. I don't know.
Mira, ya estoy alta contigo.
Ya,
Dile
ya,
la
ya le dije
verdad,
que
que
no
yo
sé
te
nada.
conozco, tú siempre estás en la calle con ese muchacho.
But agents, even the woman's own mother, doubted her story.
Yo te conozco a ti.
They asked the mother if they could install a tap and trace on her phone.
Ma, no.
Estás ridículo.
With her consent, investigators could locate the source of all incoming calls.
We needed to apprehend the other 2 suspects involved in the kidnapping of Richard Latham and his subsequent murder. So that's where the focus went from there. I mean, where in the hell are these guys, you know?
All investigators could do was wait for Ricardo Cortez to call. The FBI, U.S. Customs Service, and other agencies were closing in on 2 remaining suspects in the murder of a U.S. Customs officer. Agents had contacted the girlfriend of one of the suspects, Ricardo Cortez, and were monitoring her telephone.
Hello? Ricky? Where are you?
2 days later, she received a call.
Be careful.
It was Cortez.
Where was he at?
He didn't tell her where he was, but agents traced the call to a motel in El Paso.
Traced down the last call that was on this line.
Special Agent Charles Riley was ready.
Myself, other agents, members of the El Paso Police Department and U.S. Customs proceeded to the motel.
A SWAT team surrounded the building.
Ricardo, come out of the hotel.
Through the combined efforts of 3 law enforcement agencies, investigators accomplished their mission, according to Special Agent Don Weatherman.
The El Paso office of the FBI, Customs, and the police department there did a very good job. Cortez was arrested at that motel.
Eight days after Richard Latham's murder, Texas authorities had Ricardo Cortez in custody. A search of the room revealed no sign of suspect Carlos Pena. The driver of the Grand Prix, Ricardo Cortez, and Rafael Calderon were now in custody. Jesus Ramirez had killed himself at the traffic stop, but Carlos Pena was still at large.
Yeah, I was involved.
When questioned about the murder, Cortez gave a different account from that of the first suspect interviewed, Rafael Calderon. Cortez agreed that after they kidnapped Latham, Ramirez and Calderon led the inspector into the ditch. But Cortez said the fatal shots were fired not by Ramirez, but by Rafael Calderon. After the traffic stop by the Texas State Troopers and Ramirez committed suicide, Calderon saw an opportunity to blame his dead associate.
When Cortez stated that it was in fact Calderon who had shot Inspector Latham, this was somewhat of a surprise.
Cortez said that after the 4 split up, he and Pena abandoned the car and took a bus to Juarez, Mexico.
Cortez advised that Pena was still in Juarez and had not come over to El Paso.
The FBI realized that they could not arrest him on their own.
One of the other agents that I was working with contacted the Mexican authorities and provided them with the background information on Pena, and they started looking for Pena in Juarez.
The U.S. Customs Service offered Mexican police a reward in exchange for information leading to Pena's arrest. Police in Juarez made sure Pena's friends and relatives understood that authorities would not leave any of them alone until the fugitive surrendered. 2 days later, the tactic proved successful.
Pena contacted the El Paso FBI office and advised that he wanted to turn himself in. Arrangements were made with him to meet at the top of the Santa Fe Bridge. The top of the bridge is the border between Mexico and the United States, and there's a marker there. We are not allowed to proceed into Mexico for any interviews or any apprehensions. So by meeting him at the top of the bridge, we asked him to step across into the United States, which he did, and we took him into custody.
The manhunt was over. The investigators took Carlos Pena to the El Paso port of entry. When questioned, his story matched that of Cortez down to the slightest detail. FBI Special Agent Don Weatherman.
In my mind, the arrest of Carlos Pena pretty much summarized and concluded the investigation as to who was responsible for Richard Latham's murder. Their story was so consistent, I'm convinced that Calderon was the shooter and not the deceased, Jesse Ramirez.
In San Antonio, a federal grand jury indicted Calderon, Cortez, and Pena on 6 counts. In exchange for his cooperation, Ricardo Cortez was allowed to plead guilty to conspiracy and assault on a federal officer. Carlos Pena pled guilty to the same charges. They were also convicted of state kidnapping charges and each received 23 years. Rafael Calderon, the man who killed Richard Latham, was charged with assault and murder of a federal officer. He pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. No one had been able to stop the men from taking U.S. Customs Inspector Richard Latham's life. But his peers, his friends, made sure the killers paid the price. Customs Service Special Agent Dennis Harlan.
When anybody is murdered, it's serious business. But when an officer serves the country and protects the people, when he or she is murdered, there's something that happens within law enforcement that's very, very positive. Nobody cares about who gets credit. Everybody is interested in capturing those who were involved and seeing that justice is done.
Memorial services for Richard Latham were held at the Del Rio Port of Entry on January 31st, 1984, at 2 p.m. At 2:30, U.S. Customs officers in every port of entry in the country observed a moment of silence out of deep respect for their fallen friend. Three mysterious deaths in a Florida river confound local authorities. The preliminary investigation reveals little. But when police and the FBI find a sinister link to international drug smuggling, they uncover a conspiracy of unbridled greed and ruthless violence. It's a case that thrusts an entire city into chaos.
In the 1980s, thousands of violent criminals flooded into America from Cuba and Colombia. Drugs hit South Florida, and the area, bloated with illicit wealth, became a violent powder keg. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In the bloody Miami drug wars, the winners got rich, the losers buried, and everyone was a target.
Colombia, South America. Until the 1970s, life was simple but hard. Then, a failed economy gave way to a sharp rise in drug trafficking. The drug trade caused stiff competition that literally began to rip the country apart. Ruthless Colombian drug lords began consolidating their businesses into partnerships known as cartels. Death came to anyone who got in their way. As the cartel's influence grew, so did the American appetite for illicit drugs. And Miami became the prime point of entry for most of the cocaine smuggled into the country. And with it came bloodshed. Colombian assassins were sent to Miami to wipe out the local competition. The homicide rate grew to more than triple the national average for large cities. Miami was named the murder capital of the U.S. Former Metro-Dade homicide detective Alex Alvarez recalls how in 1979, violence came to a Miami shopping mall.
His date of birth is several drug traffickers bought out a step van, lined it with bulletproof vests and portholes, and did a drug hit. in the parking lot and sprayed it with, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds in the parking lot trying to kill their intended target.
2 known drug traffickers were killed, and several innocent bystanders were wounded.
There were also incidents of high-speed pursuits on the expressway between 2 drug dealers that were just shooting it out on the expressway during rush hour traffic. And numerous people were being injured and killed. It was like the wild, wild west, so there was a need to try to curb and stop these drug traffickers who seemed to be out of control.
A special squad was formed to deal with the violence. Central Tactical Unit, or CENTAC 26, was headquartered at the Metro-Dade Police Department. Sergeant George Placencia was a detective assigned to the unit, the first of its kind in Miami.
It was a 26th one in the nation. The purpose of forming that task force was that we would go out and monitor all the homicides in Dade County and pick and choose the ones that we thought involved major drug traffickers and attempt to work that angle, the homicide angle, and dismantle the organization.
By the mid-1980s, constant pressure from law enforcement slowly changed the way drug traffickers were doing business in Miami.
They got a little bit more sophisticated. They still did the murders, but not the shootouts in public.
Drug traffickers went deep underground, organizing cells that excluded all but family and close friends. Many cells specialized in activities such as cocaine transportation, distribution, or money laundering. In only a few years, the business had become large and sophisticated, and still very deadly. On the afternoon of July 29, 1985, a Marine salvager working on the Miami River noticed something. Off the bow of his boat, floating in the water, was a body. By the time Metro-Dade County Police responded, dock workers had pulled 2 more bodies from the river. The coroner examined the deceased for any signs of trauma or gunshot wounds. He found none. It appeared that the 3 had drowned. On the bodies, officers found beepers, Rolex watches, and plenty of cash. 2 were armed. Essentially, they were all carrying the tools of a drug smuggler. Metro-Dade police called CENTAC 26. Sergeant Placencia investigated.
Yeah, hold on, let me write this down. How many people you got over there? We started doing area cams to see if anybody had seen anything suspicious or had seen these individuals prior to them meeting their demise, and that proved to be, not so fruitful at all. Nobody had seen anything.
The 3 victims were identified as local Cuban Americans. 2 had minor police records. The official cause of death was drowning, but there was no indication how they ended up in the water or why. Detective Alex Alvarez searched for a lead in the case.
We began running records checks and contacting the Drug Enforcement Administration to see if these people were known drug traffickers.
Agents at the DEA did not know the men, but they did have a source that could help.
Right. What's the address? They had an informant, and that informant knew the son of one of the dead people that were fished out of the Miami rivers, and it was definitely drug-related. And he was going to put us into contact with the son.
That afternoon, investigators paid a visit to the son.
You know why we're here?
He was willing to tell what he knew, hoping that the mystery of his father's death could be solved.
Can you tell us what you know and how you found out about it?
Well, I know it's a really big business. He brings in thousands.
He told us that his father was one of the biggest drug smugglers in South Florida. He brought in thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of cocaine.
Well, I know last Saturday
He said his father's crew used run-down, steel-hulled vessels to smuggle drugs into the country, since the old boats aroused less suspicion than big yachts.
went out, and he hadn't called later on.
He also detailed how the smugglers built false bulkheads into the boats, concealing hidden compartments filled with hundreds and sometimes thousands of pounds of cocaine. When customs searched these boats, their only hope of finding drugs would be to use a welding torch.
See, the smugglers are smart. They know that there's no way that customs in the open ocean is going to put a torch to a boat, because if they're wrong, they'll sink the boat.
Now safely past customs, the smugglers would continue to move their enormous cargo up the Miami River.
They would park at a marina and then let it sit there for 2 or 3 days to make sure there was no surveillance. And on the second, third, or fourth day, when they were convinced there was no surveillance, they'd come at the middle of the night, unload the drugs into vans, and ship them off to different locations within South Florida.
The son said he had been visited by 2 of his father's friends who were on board the ship the night his father drowned. They told him that the boat was raided by a group of gunmen dressed as cops.
So that's where your father was going that night.
The raiders threw the 6-man crew overboard and then stole about 450 kilos of cocaine.
Each kilo at that time was worth approximately $60,000. So the net retail value of this load was approximately $27 million. Now that's not the street value. The street value is probably 2-3 times that.
The son provided the names of all 3 men who survived, but said he didn't know how to contact them. The Centac detectives needed to find out if there had been a legitimate raid at the marina. They contacted every law enforcement agency in South Florida that handled drug cases.
None of them had any operations close to the boatyard where this incident happened. So at that time, when I canceled out that this was a legitimate raid, my next focus was, well, these people must have been phony cops, people impersonating police officers, because there was a trend at that time for people to dress up as police officers and raid drug dealers' homes and steal their cash and steal their drugs.
To check the victim's son's story, investigators went to the marina where the raid took place. They interviewed the security guard who had been on duty that night.
How are you?
He said that 7 or 8 men in police uniforms rushed the marina and headed for one of the boats.
They went right past the security guard. The security guard said, being South Florida, there's nothing unusual, you know, go at it.
He hadn't gotten a good look at any of them. Investigators later searched that boat, but found no clues. So they turned their attention to looking for the 3 men who had survived the raid. 2 of the 3 survivors had minor police records, but could not be located at their last known address. The next day, Centac 26 detectives played a hunch. They figured that the survivors would likely be going to the wake for one of the deceased victims.
So we showed up at the funeral home with the names and identities of the people who we were looking for.
The detectives were right. They recognized the survivors from arrest photos and approached the men as they entered. The men confirmed the boat was overrun by a group of raiders dressed like cops.
They're wearing blue uniforms. They had their
But the men denied the boat was involved in drug running. They claimed they were simply having a party.
They had been drinking beer with the 3 victims and 2 additional friends. And while they were there drinking beer and having a good time, people in blue uniforms stormed past the front gate of the marina and started yelling, "Police, police."
The gunmen began assaulting them.
They said several friends were thrown in the water by these individuals dressed in blue uniforms.
Within minutes, all 6 men were overboard in the Miami River. But only 3 swam to safety. The investigation had now become a triple homicide. The Centac 26 detectives were convinced the raid was yet another instance of fake cops ripping off drug dealers. But again, the survivors denied that drugs were on the boat and insisted they did not know why the men attacked them. They said they didn't see any badge numbers or police cars, couldn't even tell which department the uniforms were from. With no detailed information from the 2 witnesses, the investigators were left without any significant leads. With the case stalled, the FBI offered their assistance. Special Agent Robert Martin.
At about the same time that the homicide investigation began regarding the 3 bodies found in the Miami River, an FBI cooperating witness provided some information to us regarding a group of police officers who were involved in some rip-offs. And he identified who those guys were, at least several of them, knew who some of them were, and had conversations with them.
Detective Alvarez got an unexpected call from an agent in counterintelligence.
He says he needs to meet with us, that he has a motive and possible information about our case. He put 2 and 2 together, so maybe this is related to this information that I'm getting through my informant, Armando Un.
Now we can narrow down.
Armando Un, the FBI agent said, was a well-connected nightclub worker that knew about a group of crooked cops who were ripping off drug dealers along the Miami River. Centac 26 detectives went to see Armando Un. But he did not want to see them. The interview went nowhere. It would take the murder of a friend before Armando Un would talk. A motorist was driving through the Everglades. He spotted something that piqued his curiosity, a wooden box. He pulled over. To his horror, he found a body inside. He called police. Detectives from Miami-Dade's Drug Task Force, Centac 26, were investigating the deaths of 3 men found floating in the Miami River. They hoped an informant named Armando Un could help them. His friend and employer had been found murdered in the Florida Everglades. His name was Luis Rodriguez, the owner of a nightclub in Miami's Little Havana district. He'd been shot several times in the head and then stuffed in a box rigged to spring open. A gruesome display. Investigating for Centac 26 was Detective Alex Alvarez and Sergeant George Plasencia. They needed to get Armando Un to talk.
We never mentioned anything about 3 bodies. Our ploy in speaking to him was that we were investigating the death of his best friend, the murder of his best friend.
According to Detective Plasencia, Armando Un was very candid.
We sat down and chatted with him for a while about Luis Rodriguez, and he said, yeah, Luis Rodriguez was involved in drug trafficking.
Would you recognize him? Do you know what
He admitted that Rodriguez was dealing drugs out of his nightclub and said he believed the men Rodriguez was involved with killed him.
It is true that he was trafficking drugs.
He was furious that his friend had been murdered and said he wanted to help.
He was making money for everybody.
But if he knew about police officers, real or fake, robbing drug dealers, he said nothing.
He never mentioned that the police officers were involved. He did say that Luis Rodriguez was friendly with some officers.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Armando Un seemed wary and selected his words carefully. When the interview ended, the detectives still had no suspects in the Miami River murders. All they really knew was that Luis Rodriguez was dead and may be the 4th drug murder victim in as many days. Then a City of Miami detective contacted Plasencia and Alvarez with a surprising lead. He said that Luis Rodriguez had also worked for him as a police informant.
He told us that Luis Rodriguez was giving him information about people who were dressed as police imposters and were ripping off drug dealers and committing murders in Dade County.
The detective explained that he had met Luis Rodriguez through a Miami patrol officer named Marco Rivera.
I said, we need your help now. I need you to set up a meeting between the street cop and George and I, and let's tell him that we're investigating Luis Rodriguez's murder. That'll be the cover story.
The meeting was set for that night at the Miami Police Department. Officer Rivera worked the late shift in 60 Sector, police code for Little Havana. He verified that he knew Luis Rodriguez and that Rodriguez had, on occasion, been his informant. But then, without prompting, he brought up the Miami River drownings.
He volunteered some information about the 3 bodies that were floating up in the Miami River. He said that these guys stole the drugs themselves, and when the owner of the drugs found out about it, had them murdered, or they were thrown in the water and drowned themselves, that there was no cops involved at all.
His denial that officers were involved, which no one had mentioned, seemed too forceful. The Centac 26 detectives tested him.
We asked this patrolman to repeat his story at the conclusion of our meeting, and we detected that this story didn't fit the first story that he had told us. There was something wrong there.
Rivera claimed a street source told him about the raid, so the detectives asked to speak directly with the source.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, just give me a call tomorrow. I'll try to contact him, and if I can't get in contact with him for any reason, I'll let you guys know.
For the Centac investigators, the case had taken a dramatic turn. This officer, sworn to uphold the law, seemed to be hiding something. The following day, Officer Marco Rivera introduced the detectives to the source who allegedly had information about the Miami River murders.
I don't know if I should even be talking to these guys. I don't even know, bro.
Rivera claimed his source could verify that drug trafficking Colombians had carried out the raid, not Miami cops.
Hey, listen on, man. Hey, listen, we understand that.
But as the source spoke, he had a hard time remembering details of his story. Officer Rivera had to help him remember, according to Detective Alvarez.
The officer keeps having to correct him. No, it happened like this, and tell him about this, and he's filling in the blanks for this guy who's obviously been coached and cued on what to say. So we knew at that point, obviously, he was covering something up.
Officer Rivera's cover-up meant the detectives were faced with an even more serious problem. In case the deadly raiders were actually Miami police officers, they needed to be very careful.
This is a problem that we weren't really trained or focused in to investigate, which is, we're not internal affairs investigators. We don't investigate cops. That wasn't our role. That wasn't our job. But we were charged with the responsibilities of investigating these murders, and if these murders were committed by cops, they were fair play. We realized that if we were going to start to investigate cops, we'd have to do things very differently.
The Centac 26 detectives had to cover themselves. They asked the police chief to hold their personnel files as a precaution against internal leaks.
We did a lot of things to protect our identity and our family's identity. We took everything that we had in our names and took them out of our names so they couldn't trace where we lived and who we were. We're investigating. They're going to find out who we are. So right away, we built a wall between them and us.
Once they felt safe, Centac detectives began investigating the officers working the night shift in 60 Sector, Little Havana. Officer Marco Rivera's beat.
Sounds good. Okay.
With the chief's permission, Miami PD's Internal Affairs gave CENTAC 26 the personnel records for the officers in question.
Well, the City of Miami Internal Affairs Unit was very concerned. They were very cooperative. They, the names that we provided to them, they started looking into and giving us the backgrounds that they had on these individuals.
The investigators focused on a close-knit group of 8 officers, all relatively recent hires who joined the force at a time when Miami was in crisis. In the spring of 1980, Cuban President Fidel Castro had announced he would allow thousands of political refugees to seek asylum in foreign countries. The U.S. agreed to accept 3,500. Then, unexpectedly, Castro announced that for the first time in years, he would also allow American boats to enter Mariel Harbor. The result was what became known as the Mariel Boat Lift. More than 120,000 Cuban refugees flooded into South Florida, which overwhelmed Miami's ability to handle them. Most were hard-working immigrants looking for a chance at the American dream. Most, but not all.
10% of them was estimated were criminals that were dumped out of the prison system of Fidel Castro. So there was a spike in the crime wave in Miami-Dade County.
To stem the rising crime rate, the city had to hire over 400 new cadets in 3 years.
Instead of hiring the best candidate, they hired anybody who was just marginally acceptable. They just couldn't find enough quality candidates, and they went for quantity as opposed to quality.
CENTAC 26 began surveillance, watching as the officers in question hung out together after hours, enjoying lifestyles far beyond the means of honest police officers. Marco Rivera was the suspected ringleader. Armando Garcia had recently become part owner of a bodybuilding gym. Osvaldo Coelho had just retired from the force. He was 30 years old, driving a $100,000 Lotus. It was easy to track their lavish spending.
One officer bought a home and built this pool, and he paid the developer cash. Showed up with a bag full of cash and gave it to him here for the purchase of my home.
Still, the detectives had little solid evidence.
Yeah, I'm in front of the restaurant. I don't see any marked units over here. But our boy is definitely over here having coffee with some friends outside, but I don't see any units.
They needed first-hand information, and they needed it soon. If these officers had already left at least 3 people dead, the detectives feared there could easily be more. 4 people had been murdered in Miami over a $27 million drug deal, gone bad. With so much money involved, the dividing line between the criminals and the cops blurred. The FBI offered their assistance to local law enforcement. Special Agent Robert Martin.
We began an investigation which became a joint investigation into whether there was some police corruption in the city of Miami.
Drug Task Force detectives with CENTAC 26 had narrowed their investigation to a suspected group of corrupt Miami police officers. But the detectives needed inside information if they had any chance of cracking the case. They hoped they could get it from a reluctant police informer named Armando Un. They had already interviewed Un about the murder of his friend and partner, nightclub owner Luis Rodriguez. He seemed wary, perhaps afraid they too were dirty cops.
Hey, Armando, I want you to look at these photographs, see if you recognize anyone.
Detective George Placencia tried to win his trust by showing photos of their surveillance of the suspect officers.
And he started looking through the photos, and he just paused. He dropped the photographs and shook her hand, and he says, "You guys are doing a good job. Let's sit down and talk."
But unfortunately, these things go wrong.
Came down to Centec 26, where he told Detective Alex Alvarez he figured he had nothing to lose.
He was scared. He thought, well, if I stick it out with the crooked cops, they were the ones that probably killed my partner. And he said, well, if they killed him, the next person to go is me.
In a marathon debriefing, he explained the origins of the rogue officers and their criminal enterprise. He said his friend and employer, nightclub owner Luis Rodriguez, had grown tired of the officers coming into his bar and shaking down his patrons for small amounts of drugs.
He wanted to make sure that his customers weren't bothered. So he first started paying the cops off not to come.
And you can maybe get a couple of gram arrests.
Soon he devised another plan that could make everyone some money.
You know, sometimes these things happen. It's just the nature of the business.
According to Luis Rodriguez said to the officers, hey, you know what? Instead of arresting these people that are coming over here with petty drugs, why don't I set up deals, you know, maybe multi-kilo deals, more drugs involved, and when these people come over, I'll give you a description of their car, where they're coming from. You can stop them, steal their cocaine, bring it to me, I'll sell it, I'll give you a share.
The officers agreed.
What made this whole thing possible for these cops was they grew up and knew people who were in the drug trade. And that was the one aspect of what they had going for them.
Patrolman Marco Rivera ran the ripoffs. It seemed a perfect plan. The dealers would never incriminate themselves by reporting the thefts, and Rodriguez would always come through with the cash.
Get in your car. You have a good night now.
Said the operation grew quickly, with more and more cops becoming involved. But they got greedy, wanting to do more rip-offs and bigger ones.
So the policeman said, okay, it was all good. And it all first began with...
Rodriguez introduced them to a second bar owner who knew of larger shipments.
Luis Rodriguez brought in another bar owner. He knew and he worked smuggling boatloads of drugs into the United States. And Rodriguez says, wait a minute, why stop at these 1 kilo, 2 kilograms of cocaine drug bust? Why don't we go for the boatloads and get 300, 400, 500 kilograms of cocaine at one shot?
Didn't know about the raid where the 3 men drowned, but he did describe an earlier one the second bar owner had set up. A group of Miami officers had slipped aboard a boat at another marina, thinking the crew had left for the night.
Clear.
They knew exactly where the drugs were hidden. But during the unloading, they noticed the air conditioning was on. And suspected the crew was still on board, hiding. The crewmen surrendered. The raiders wasted no time disposing of the crew, as they had in the other raid. This time, no one drowned. All the men swam safely to shore. The cops finished up, then drove off with about 200 kilos of cocaine, valued at over $10 million. Armando Un confirmed the names of the officers involved, the very ones Sentak had been watching. Unfortunately, the investigators knew his credibility would be attacked in court.
Jury's not going to believe Armando Un, a self-proclaimed admitted drug trafficker, over, half a dozen or a dozen respected police officers. They're just not going to believe it. So we need more evidence.
What they needed was a confession on tape from the very cops they were investigating. They brought in the local bar owner from the drug raids and explained the evidence they had implicating him in the ripoffs. He reluctantly agreed to wear a wire and to meet with Officer Marco Rivera. But he said Rivera had been avoiding him for weeks, no doubt because of the Sentak 26 investigation. They would have to trick him into the meeting. Investigators hoped the results would be worth the risk. Detectives set up in a building across from a bar in the area Rivera patrolled and sent the informant inside. When surveillance units confirmed Rivera was nearby, detectives called 911 and reported a bar fight.
Some officers down to 34th and 8th.
Officer Rivera drove up just as they planned. Rivera entered, looking for the alleged fight, but everything was quiet. The informant made his move. He told the officer he'd been subpoenaed by the U.S. Attorney's Office and wanted to know what to say. Rivera took the bait, but he didn't want to talk in front of witnesses. The corrupt cop spoke freely about his involvement in the drug operation.
So what's the real deal? Why are you worried?
So I got Joey Tamuenzo, yeah, he's dead. He ain't gonna talk. Unless they go in that courtroom with a Ouija board and no one say nothing, okay?
Rivera had no idea everything he said was being recorded. In Miami, investigators pursued a group of rogue police officers suspected of ripping off drug dealers and killing at least 3 of them. The detectives of Sentak 26 finally managed to tape an incriminating conversation with the group's leader, Officer Rivera, as he talked about the raids, the drugs, the dirty cops. Detective Alex Alvarez.
It was key evidence because it was the corrupt police officer's own words about what he did, when he did it, and who he did it with.
The U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami reviewed the tapes. Assistant U.S. Attorney Russell Killinger knew they would need as much evidence as possible to convince a jury that several Miami law enforcement officers were behind the murders and thefts. The tapes provided a good start, but Killinger needed more evidence to implicate the other officers. Perhaps Armando Un could get it.
We wanted to get Un wearing a wire and talking to the other cops so that we get those other cops to confirm their own participation out of their own mouths.
Wearing a wire, Un met with Miami officers Marco Rivera and Armando Garcia. He told them that investigators were asking him questions about the boat raids. They warned him not to cooperate. He assured him Sentak had nothing on any of them.
Listen, they all over me. They all over me.
They all over everybody. It doesn't matter. They ain't got nothing.
They don't have a damn thing on their face.
I don't want you guys to be seen.
But then they became suspicious, asking him if he was wired.
What's the matter, man?
That effectively halted all plans to record any more of the officers. But investigators were undaunted.
We decided to take more of an overt approach in the investigation and go to the next level, which was basically subpoenaing witnesses to the grand juries, issuing bank subpoenas for bank records and financial records.
Investigators began cataloging the assets of the suspects, including Marco Rivera's safety deposit box at a Miami bank. The box contained over $260,000 in cash, nearly 10 times his annual salary. Like Rivera, the other suspect officers left incriminating money trails.
The money was burning holes in their pockets, and they were going out and spending money left and right. They buy $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 cars, cash. They bought homes valued in excess of $200,000, cash. They bought expensive furniture. They put down cash. Now, this is an officer who's making $30,000. We had an enormous amount of evidence.
The financial records, together with the taped conversations, were enough evidence for arrest warrants to be issued.
Suspecting you guys.
2 days after Christmas 1985, Centac 26, Miami PD, and the FBI began the arrests, taking down 6 Miami cops, including the ringleader, Officer Marco Rivera. Officer Armando Garcia was also arrested without incident. Osvaldo Coelho and Emilio Rey surrendered in the following days. The trial began on September 29, 1986. Federal prosecutors thought they had a strong case.
We felt pretty good about the case. We'd gotten pretty much all the evidence in that we had hoped to get in.
Then, on January 21st, 1987, the jury came back with their verdicts.
I remember the judge just kept looking at the verdict forms, and he would look at one and put it down, and look at another and put it down, then pick up the other one and look at it again, and this went on for, it seemed like an eternity. And then he started shaking his head.
The jury was deadlocked, causing the judge to declare a mistrial. One juror had refused to deliberate. Investigators were stunned as all suspects were released.
That was really a low point in the investigation. We found out later, because the 11 jurors that voted for conviction were so convinced that these officers, because of all the evidence, were guilty, they started coming forward and saying, you know, we started getting contacted by friends and family members of these cops offering us jobs and offering us money, and we knew that that was an attempt to try to get us to sway our votes.
The mistrial was an enormous setback. Detectives knew if they could not put these corrupt cops away, the people of Miami may never trust law enforcement again. A group of Miami officers were arrested and prosecuted for corruption, but chaos in the jury room resulted in a mistrial. All suspects were released.
They were thrilled that they weren't convicted. What they didn't realize, that it was probably a blessing in disguise for us, because all that did is give us more time, and we were more determined to find out more evidence against them, and that's exactly what happened.
The prosecutor and detectives were unwilling to give up. With so much at stake, investigators needed a break. They finally got one.
We found out that these officers had hired a hitman to kill Armando Un.
That hitman was Killer Joe Martinez. He confessed to being hired, hoping he'd get leniency for another crime he had committed.
We brought him in. He testified against the River cops. We were able to add more charges against them. And by that time, you know, the case was just becoming stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and they had nowhere to go, and then they started to fold and they started to cooperate.
The case finally broke wide open when one of the defendants, Patrolman Emilio Rey, decided to confess. Through his lawyer, he had learned of the additional evidence against him. He hoped for sentencing leniency in exchange for his testimony.
He described to us some fairly bone-chilling conspiracies that had gone on and that were going on in an effort to try to kill the government witnesses.
All of the government's witnesses, especially Armando Un, were in danger. Investigators knew they had to use Patrolman Rey's confession to put more pressure on the other river cops. Facing the beefed-up federal case, ringleader Marco Rivera confessed.
He had implicated some 60 other City of Miami police officers in various criminal activities.
Unfortunately, Osvaldo Coelho and Armando Garcia fled the Miami area. 5 months later, an FBI informant said Coelho was hiding in the Bahamas. The FBI has no formal jurisdiction outside the United States, so it maintains legal attaché offices called legats in many foreign countries. They work as liaisons with each country's national police. The FBI liaison asked the Bahamian police for their assistance. They agreed to help get Coelho. Coelho was wanted for taking part in massive and deadly cocaine ripoffs in Miami. Investigators knew he had a broad network of friends he could ask for help. Coelho called one of them several times to arrange for assistance.
Yeah, I can help you. What do you need?
Okay, I can do that. Good. See you then.
What Coelho didn't know was that the FBI had already approached the friend, and he was working as an informant. The Bahamian police arrested Osvaldo Coelho without incident. He was extradited back to Miami to face charges of drug trafficking, conspiracy, and racketeering. Armando Garcia was the last of the rogue Miami cops still at large. On January 8, 1989, the FBI added Garcia to their 10 most wanted fugitives list. FBI Special Agent Robert Martin.
We don't pick our top 10 fugitives lightly. They have to be people that we consider to be a serious danger, not only to society, but to the very nature and fabric of what makes our country what it is. And one of those things is honest law enforcement services. Our Garcia was added to the list for that reason.
The FBI had evidence that Garcia may have fled to South America, but had few leads. Special Agent Robert Martin ran the public corruption squad that kept searching for the elusive fugitive.
Armando Garcia was uniquely qualified to understand what it was going to take to survive out of the country. Here was a police officer who knew every technique that we might use to find him or capture him. A guy that knew the difficulties moving in and out of foreign countries and doing investigations in those foreign countries. On top of that, you had a guy that had a lot of money. Hey, I was just looking at these passports.
Garcia could be anywhere. For 4 years, agents looked into hundreds of leads with negative results. Then, in late 1993, the FBI got a tip. A friend was planning to visit the Garcia family in Colombia.
Okay, she didn't have it. I tell you, if you just make that call.
Agents worked with the Colombian police who followed the friend to an apartment in Cali. Agents believed that fugitive Armando Garcia was living there.
The Columbia National Police set up a surveillance with a number of units. It was going to be a 24-hour surveillance, and waited to see if they could identify anybody who would come out or travel around with her.
Three days later, they spotted Armando Garcia. The fugitive was caught off guard, unarmed.
Hold it, Garcia.
Garcia told them, said, I have $4,000 with me. You see the jewelry I have, you see my automobile, I have goods and belongings in my apartment. You can have all of that if you just let me go. And to quote the Columbia National Police official who came to Miami to describe events, they then told Armando Garcia, we're not the dirty cops, you are.
The last of the main suspects, Armando Garcia pleaded guilty to drug trafficking, racketeering, and tax evasion, and was sentenced to 25 years. When it was all over, 17 Miami officers were convicted for their involvement in the drug rip-off ring. It was the largest police corruption case in Florida history. In response to the scandal, the City of Miami Police Department formed its own internal investigations unit that targeted over 100 additional officers.
They obviously were suffering from all the media exposure and then the embarrassment of having numerous officers arrested, but I think it made them a stronger department. When you weed out the bad officers, it just makes the good officers shine even brighter.